Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Joel, and let's deal with the 800-pound gorilla in the room with the pink tutu. I did not fall off a ladder, although it did have something to do with Christmas lights. I am recovering from a dislocated elbow, and it sounds far worse than it actually was. I'm more embarrassed than anything else, but it was either this or I'd have to be extremely stiff with that left arm. So once you get used to seeing it, you just don't see it anymore. You don't think about it. So that's what it was. It wasn't a ladder. I'll tell you, I've told the story a dozen times this morning. I will not tell it a dozen more, so that was your last pass on it. But whether it's with injury or without, this time of year is where we talk so much about joy and talk about, we get happiness and joy confused and mixed in a lot. And what does it mean to be joyful? What does it mean to even discuss joy? Where do we find joy? What are some sources of joy in our lives? We're joyful for those who join us online, and we're joyful when you cross that line and you join us in person. Some of you are here today because you watched us online for a while, and now you're here. That brings us joy and happiness, and they are different. But I wanted to get some context on this, and so we have enlisted the help of two great volunteers, Dilly and Jenny, who are going to come join me. And I'm going to ask them some questions that, as I'm asking them, I'm sure you're going to think of these questions too. They're not hard questions. Just come right over here into the light where the camera can see you. All right, so it's Dilly and Jenny, and my questions are really simple. The first one, and we'll go ladies first. Sorry, no pressure. You got to talk for anybody. What makes you laugh? What makes you laugh?
Just to see people like you, all beautiful people like it is here. So just little things in life, family, friends, games.
Golf. Yeah, you're a big golfer. I know that. All right, what about you, Dilly? What makes you laugh? Well, maybe it'll be on when you say something. Well, you can grab that one. Number 5 will work.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Now that makes me laugh. That you swap mics. There we go. Okay. Let's see. That makes us laugh. What else makes you laugh?
Seeing people happy make me laugh.
Okay.
Seeing people happy makes me laugh.
Seeing people laugh at your mic not working, that made you laugh?
Yeah, it made me laugh.
Yeah. That's okay. Okay. This one's a little harder. Jenny, what makes you grateful? What makes you grateful or thankful?
Every day, the Lord, just to look. Like I said, little things in life, just to look at the birds, the weather, the not sun or sun. God said, be joyful always.
That's right.
It doesn't mean even if things not well, we still rejoice in the Lord, knowing that He loves us no matter what.
Yeah. All right. Dilly, what about you? What makes you grateful or thankful?
The privilege that God grants me to see every day as they come, knowing that it could have been worse. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not where I used to be. That
Wow.
makes me grateful.
Yeah, boy, that is cause to be grateful. All right, so this one might be the easiest one. I don't know. What makes you feel just really good about life? Just like really just fills your cup. Makes you feel really good about life.
When I can golf well, and that makes me happy. It's a hard thing. No, but I'm just alive.
Yeah, the closer to your mouth it gets, the less it does that.
Every day,
There you go.
And be with my family, and just to know that God gave us a day every day that we can get up and do what He wants us to do. That makes me joyful and happy.
Awesome. And Dilly, that was what makes you feel really good about life? What just fills your cup up and just makes you feel really good about life?
Well, that sounds more difficult than... What makes me joyful, good about life is that all the dynamics that life throws at you, and you find out that, it's a mix and match. Just keep fighting, keep going after it, right? You can't always have it all good, you can't always have it all bad. Just the mix, the dynamics of life itself, just like, okay, let's keep going.
Awesome. Okay, well, will you thank them for helping me out? There's a thank you from me for being a part of this. Thanks so much. It is not easy to get up and answer questions. They had like 30 seconds to even know what I was going to do with them. Joy is this thing we talk about all the time. We talk about, it is built into the themes of Christmas. Candle about joy. I mean, we talk about it a lot. We sing it in songs. I mean, the whole concept of finding joy and being joyful is, I guess, as old as Christmas itself. We Christians have been singing about joy and Christmas Forever. I mean, an old Christmas hymn says, "Good Christians all rejoice with heart and soul and voice. Give ye heed to what we say. Jesus Christ is born today. Man and beast before him bow, and he is in the manger now. Christ is born today." And growing up, we always held that note really long till we all ran out of breath. Christ is born today. I mean, it's built into the song. Rejoice. Be happy, be glad. And we oftentimes will think happiness is the same as joy, and it's not. Happiness is an emotion. Joy is a focus. Joy is what you see. Joy is what you're looking at and staring at and fixating on. Happiness is what you feel, often as a result of it. You see, scientists have done like this research over and over and over again that have shown how much laughter actually benefits us. That laughter benefits every major organ in the body, including our brain. Laughter releases endorphins, which helps you not feel pain as much. Laughter does all kinds of things. It helps your stomach. It helps your intestines. I mean, God designed us to have a light heart. Matter of fact, I want to give you a gift. I already gave you one gift accidentally with Dilly's mic. But here's another one. Did you know these health benefits even extend to our bodies when we fake a laugh? Our bodies don't know the difference. So I want you all to fake laugh on the count of 3. All right? 1, 2, 3. Keep it going. Come on. There we go. See? You're welcome. You're welcome. Now, some of you are really laughing. Isn't it amazing? God designed our bodies to do this, and then it triggers this stuff in our brain, and then we really find it funny. What's funny? We don't know. But the brain just goes, this is a riot. And for those of you who didn't participate, you're just as grumpy now as you were before, but now you really look it because we're all smiling. It's weird how God designed us, and it's all about what we focus on. Your body didn't even know the difference. Now, as we get into this countdown to Christmas and we're talking about what Jesus did for us and that we celebrate on December 25th, we're not just talking about a single day. We're talking about an event that changed everything, an event that changed, even human existence. We're going to talk about this more on Christmas Eve, but before Jesus' birth, human life was exceedingly cheap. It was almost worthless, and children were probably the bottom of the food chain in terms of the way we considered humans. But Jesus changed all that because he came as a baby. He changed everything. And over, we find in Scripture in the darkest times of life, in the times when things are the worst in Scripture and you kind of read the pages and you're going, man, it just can't get much worse. Then you turn the page and you go, oh, it just got worse. And in the middle of all that, you find some voice speaking for the Lord saying, rejoice. Be of good cheer. Be encouraged, because that's when we need joy the most. But that's kind of the problem, though. Joy can kind of run away from us. When there's more month than money, when there's more losing than winning, when there's more death than life, more sorrow than happiness, when there's more oppression than liberation. It can be a little harder to focus on joy. It can be harder to see that, and yet God calls us to rejoice even in the midst of all of that. So today, as we're in part 3 of the countdown to Christmas, we're talking about what should bring us tremendous joy as Christians, and that is the countdown to the kingdom. When the kingdom of heaven started walking on earth and changed everything. We continue in the book of Isaiah, where we'll be through this whole series until Christmas Eve. We're going to take a little diversion and hit the book of John for that one. But Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. And if you were here last week, that is not a typo. We did the first 6 verses of Isaiah chapter 9 last week. We're picking it up at verse 6 again and going into verse 7 to see when the kingdom arrives. That's page 472 in the Pew Bible there in front of you. And if you don't have one of a print copy of the Bible for your very own, please take this as a gift from us. And we would love nothing more than for you to have a copy of the Bible if you want one. But whether you are borrowing this for today or taking it as a gift, it's page 472. Words will also be up on the screen. You can follow along in your print or electronic Bible as we read the words of Isaiah chapter 9, because as I've reminded you every week, Isaiah was in a dark world at the time he's writing this. It was not happy days and carefree living. It was rough. They had watched the northern kingdom fall to the Assyrians, and the southern kingdom had their own problems going on. Things were falling apart. And in the middle of all of that, Isaiah is telling them, Isaiah chapter 9, 6 and 7, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. As I said last week, the gift of the Son to humanity was in fact a gift. The Son was a gift to us. I pointed out last week in verse 6 that the language Isaiah is writing in, which is Hebrew, these verbs in verse 6 are all future tense. He's reminding us this is something that is going to happen. Now with God, it's a sure thing. But it's going to happen in the future. And indeed, from his perspective, he's writing 700 years before Bethlehem. We're looking back over 2,000, but we're looking at the same event. He saw it in faith. We see it as historical fact. But we're looking at the same event, and it's the same gift that's given. But here's something else to note in verse 6 of Isaiah chapter 9. Those same verbs in Hebrew that he's writing in are also passive, meaning, here's why that's important, it means the action is not being done by humanity. The action is being done for us. This was not something where humans were going to manipulate bloodlines to produce the Messiah. This wasn't like the movie Dune or something like that, okay? This wasn't humans coming up and marrying into the right people and these people and putting them in the right place to make this happen. No, God's making a point to say, I will do all of this. And what will come in the Messiah will be my doing, and I will do it for humanity. I mean, after all, there's nothing we could do about it. So God had to do it, and He gave us this gift of His Son. Now, the Apostle Paul was writing about this same thing Isaiah's talking about, the same thing we're celebrating. He's just a few years from it, though. He's within a few decades of Jesus' life. And he writes this in Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. When the set time had fully come, God sent His Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Because you are His sons, God sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So, you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are His child, God has also made you an heir. That's what Paul is looking at just a few decades from it, this gift that was given and all the rights and benefits that come with this gift given to humanity. Now back into Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, his titles, which I pointed out last week. Now you're going to see the other side of these titles. That He will be called Wonderful Counselor, meaning He will have the wisdom of a deity and He will operate in that wisdom. Even in Isaiah's time, 700 years in advance, there's something different about this child. Now He just comes right out and says it. He's going to be called Mighty God. Now not even Abraham, the father of all Jewish people, not even Abraham was called Mighty God. Not even a king of Israel or Judah would have ever been called Mighty God. It would have been blasphemy. But the Messiah would be called Mighty God. Everlasting Father. I pointed out last week that in Hebrew is a word picture for Father of forever, meaning He's eternal. But there's something else that goes on here with this word Father that Jewish people would have heard, especially in the time of Jesus. Because a father was the head of a tribe. The father was the head of the clan. He was the head of the family. And as daughters would marry sons and come into the family, the father would just simply become the head of a bigger family. And so in a sense, what Isaiah is telling us is that Jesus would be the head of the tribe. Now in time, we learn that would be called the church. But He would be the head of it all. He'd be the father of all of it. It's not saying He's the same as God the Father. It's a Jewish expression saying that He's going to be the head of the family. And also the Prince of Peace. You see, it's not just that He was going to stop hostility. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, it's that true peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of justice. That's what Jesus will do. It was from these titles that He even got that expression that Jesus isn't just going to stop war, He's going to establish a standard so that there will be no more war. There will be no more need for war. There'll be justice and there'll be righteousness. This is what He would do when He would come to the earth. See, because here's the neat thing about it. Verse 7, the Lord finishes what He starts. Jesus, God the Father didn't just start something and just kind of throw Jesus into the mix and then come along and just go, well, Jesus, you got to figure this out. No. He has fixated on this down through time and has caused these events to occur. And so we see in verse 7 what the government of Jesus is going to bring to the picture. Now, this was started in a spiritual sense in Bethlehem. But from our perspective, most of this is still in the future. But we have hints of it today. These 4 things we see that the government of Jesus will bring is first, he will reign with a limitless peace. Again, because he will have that standard, which we'll talk about in a minute. Jesus will reign, number 2, on King David's throne and reestablish his kingdom. That is more significant than we might realize. At the time Isaiah is writing, they're about to see the collapse of the Davidic line of kings. They're about to kill the last one. And some 200 years after Isaiah is writing this, now follow me in the time, he's 700 years before Jesus. Roughly 200 years after his lifetime, the southern kingdom of Judah falls, and the Davidic king line is broken. But Jesus would come along and reestablish that kingdom because he was from the house, he was from the line of David. Number 3, he will reign with the principles of justice and righteousness, which is why there'll be limitless peace. Because there's no need for war because he creates this system of justice. Number 4, he'll reign forever, as explained in the covenant made with David himself in 2 Samuel 7:16. That what Jesus will do is a perfect fulfillment of everything God promised would happen. And by the way, the promise to King David was long before Isaiah even came on the picture. God has been working this out for thousands and thousands of years. This was not happenstance. This was not just, gee, this kind of worked out great. We talked about that in the very first message at the end of November. The statistical likelihood of one person living in such a way to fulfill even 48 of these 400 prophecies would have been impossible. God has been working on this for a long time. The end of verse 7 in Isaiah chapter 9 tells us why it's going to happen. That the zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Now, you got to understand this. There is not an atom or subatomic particle in this universe not under God's control. He is sovereign over everything. He sits on his throne and everything obeys his command. Every single particle in this universe. But then that verse tells us, that last little part of that verse tells us his zeal will accomplish this. Now, to put that word in Hebrew that we see translated into English as zeal, to kind of paraphrase it, what it means is laser sharp focus. Like a dog fixated on a toy. Imagine what would happen if God the Father fixates on something. That is why he made it accomplished. I mean, it was going to happen anyway, but it was accomplished because he finishes what he starts. He has been focused on this plan since Genesis chapter 3, when humanity fell from perfection, sin entered the human race, everything fell apart. God was already working. He had already had this plan in mind. It was not a surprise to him, and his zeal would ensure this would happen. Now, why is any of this important? See, I remember sitting where you have sat on a Sunday morning, a few Sundays before Christmas. Family's about to come in town. Life's about to get crazy. Still some shopping to do. Shortages. Now you have trouble finding stuff. So as every guy is waiting until Christmas Eve to go shopping, he's not going to find anything. It's tough. And I've sat where you are, and I hear all those Old Testament prophecies, and it's like, yeah, but it all happened. So what did it matter? Good question. See, it mattered because God had a plan. Because we couldn't keep our part of the bargain. You see, we were too sinful. We were too imperfect. If left to our own devices, we just mess things up. If you don't believe me, read a history book. We just mess it up. When we get ourselves in an equation, we just mess up. That's what we do. If left to our own devices, we just go from bad to worse. I don't know about you, but my parents did not raise a perfect child. My parents had to discipline me. Now, why did they do that? Is that because they were mean, or was it because there was something in me that was obsessed with rebellion? Like every child. Why did we do that? Sin. That's why we do that. We're wired that way. This is the problem, that we could not get to heaven. We couldn't be good enough to reach that far. The gulf was too deep. It was too wide. It was a Grand Canyon, and all we could do was hobble on one leg and try to jump across it. We were never going to make it to heaven. It was impossible. And so God had to send his Son down to us. And when Jesus came down to that stable in Bethlehem, he stretched heaven all the way down to us because we could not go to him. And in an unfathomable love, he came down here to us. He did everything we couldn't. He was everything we couldn't be so that we could become everything he is. He came down here as a living, breathing, walking paradox. The king's servant, the God-man, the holy human. But isn't that just like God? To do the impossible and the unexpected, and yet do it in the most beautiful, amazing way. And that's what he did. He bridged the gulf between humanity and himself, and in doing so, the Father gave us his Son. All that Old Testament prophecy stuff is the proof of why it mattered. I tell Christians you need to read the Old Testament. The Old Testament has most of the stories in it. But you don't understand why the New Testament existed if you don't get what happens in the Old. If you don't know what happened in Genesis 3, then Bethlehem doesn't seem quite so perfect and quite so wondrous. If you don't understand why Joseph had to be the adopted father of Jesus, it's because we don't understand the Old Testament. If you don't understand why Mary had to be who she was and have her parents and her grandparents and her great-grandparents, it's because we don't understand the Old Testament well enough that God went through a lot of trouble to give us his Son. Around about 85 years ago, one of the preeminent scholars of the day, Dr. Karl Barth, was invited to be a guest lecturer at the University of Chicago Divinity School. That alone tells you a lot that the University of Chicago had a divinity school. That's how long ago it was. 85 years, give or take. And he was lecturing there, and when he finished this incredible lecture, the students and faculty and guests were out there just filling up notepads with notes of what this guy could just recite. And he gets through with this, and the president of the school steps up and says, Dr. Barth is not feeling well tonight, and I know he wants to take questions from the audience, but he's extremely tired, and he needs his rest, and it really wouldn't be fair of us to ask him to do so. So the president said, I will ask, therefore, one question on behalf of all of us. So he turns to Dr. Karl Barth, and he says, Dr. Barth, of all the theological insights you have ever had, which is the greatest? Now, this was a perfect question to ask. This guy had written tens of thousands of pages of probably some of the most sophisticated theology that we're still trying to figure out what he meant and what he wrote. And it was a perfect question to ask. A single question that would have been so profound that everyone is turning pages to have a whole sheet to write whatever he's going to say. Pencil is firmly attached to paper. Faculty, students, guests, people are clicking pictures. They're waiting for what he's going to say. And he closes his eyes and he leans back. A few moments he smiles a little bit and opens his eyes and he says, the greatest theological insight I have ever had is this. Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. Bridging the gulf between humanity and himself, the Father gave us his Son. The greatest theological insight any of us could ever have, that kind of love existed. Even the New Testament writers marveled at this. John, the apostle who walked with Jesus, probably the youngest of the apostles, writes this in 1 John chapter 4, verse 10. He says, this is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. It's because the gulf was too big, it was too great, and so the Father gave us his Son to bridge that. And probably just as profound as the fact that he loved me and you that much is that Jesus wanted to do it. Hebrews chapter 12, second part of verse 2 says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Meaning Jesus wasn't kicked out of heaven to do this like a whining teenager. No. And he wasn't like a 2-year-old in the middle of Walmart either screaming about it. Jesus said, this is joy that I go. That's amazing. That's the greatest theological insight we could ever figure out, is that Jesus loved us that much that he chose to do it. The Father didn't make him do it. He chose to do it. Bridging the gulf between humanity and himself, the Father gave his Son, and this should cause us great joy. Because joy is not an emotion. Joy is a focus. It's what you see, it's what you look at, it's what you gaze on, it's what you fixate on. Maybe at the beginning you answered those same questions in your head that I asked them. What makes you laugh? if you're looking for it, you're going to find all kinds of things to laugh at. I laugh at myself on a regular basis. I mean, you're going to laugh all the time. I mean, come on. You should have seen, you shouldn't have, actually, it was terrible, but you should have seen a left-handed person brushing his teeth with his right hand. I looked like a toddler. I'm like, Patty, I'm missing my mouth. I got toothpaste on my ear. It was hilarious. I'm laughing at the time, and she's being nice about it, but I'm laughing. What makes you laugh? What makes you grateful? I mean, I don't like having an injured wing, but I'm grateful it's not broken. What makes you grateful? What makes your cup just feel really full? I'm sure you went through and answered those questions in your head to go, what would I say if I was up there? See, that's joy. It's what you focus on. So if you've been redeemed, if you're a disciple of Jesus, if you claim to be a Christian, act like it. And we talk a lot about behavior and actually walking the walk. I don't quite mean that. I really mean more the attitude, what's going on inside of our heads and hearts. When someone thinks of you, do you think they think of someone who is lighthearted and winsome? Do you think they think of someone who tends to see things on the bright side? As someone who tends to always say, you know what, I'm just thankful that my cup has any water at all. Who cares if it's full or empty? I'm just thankful I have it. Is that how people see you? That's what I mean. If you've been redeemed, act like it. If you're like me and you have a mean resting face, see if I can show you my resting face. People are like, Joel, why are you mad, bro? I'm not mad. This is my face. This is my face on me, okay? If you have a mean resting face, you're going to have to really let your heart inform your face that you've been redeemed, okay? Because our face may not show it. I mean, I was out in the yard doing something on the Christmas lights, and someone happened to drive by. I don't know why you people just drive by in the middle of the day, but you do. And you drove by, and someone says, man, you look so mad. I'm like, that's my face. I'm not mad at all. I was actually enjoying myself. Well, if that was enjoyment. You get the idea. If you've been redeemed, act like it. And that even means our face. People should know us as people who are lighthearted because our fixation, our focus is on Jesus, and that's joyful. Not always happy. No, we're not always going to be happy. But funny thing with joy, when we fixate on Jesus and we focus on that, happiness usually tends to follow. When you realize that whatever that problem is, He's got it. When you realize that if God can go to all that trouble to bring Jesus to this planet, thousands of years of planning, thousands of years, pages of stories in the Old Testament that God has orchestrated to bring Jesus to that moment, and He tells you and me to cast our burdens onto Him because He cares, don't you think He's got whatever that problem is covered? Of course He does. So if you've been redeemed, act like it. Now that's what we can do with this great joy in our own lives, but what about us as a church? How do we find joy as a church? I mean, full buildings, good offerings, sure, that's great. I love that. But how do we actually find joy? What brings us joy as a church? I can tell you one big way it brings us joy. When people take another step towards Jesus, that brings us joy. Amen. Because that's our fixation. Our fixation as a church is walking towards Jesus, especially when someone makes the move, the one that goes from death to life, and they receive that gift of God's grace, and we get to put balloons up and celebrate it. That brings us joy. When someone goes all in and follows the Lord in baptism, in 2 weeks, the last Sunday of the year, we're going to have the last baptism of the year, and we have several signed up. That brings us joy because it's someone taking the next step, and they're showing that, and we get to relive that moment in our lives. That brings us joy because it focuses our attention on the Lord. When parents come up and they say, we're committing ourselves to raising our children in a Jesus-centered home, our parent-child dedication, that brings us joy. That's also coming up in 2 weeks on the last Sunday of the year. This last Sunday of the year, December 26th, the day that most of us don't know what to do with because it's the day after Christmas, it's going to be a joyful celebration here because we're going to fixate on those things that bring us joy, which is what Jesus is doing in people's lives. That brings us joy. Praying with people when you come forward, that brings us joy. Why? Gets another step towards Jesus, and we get to walk with you on the journey. What brings us joy as a church is when people walk towards Jesus, because that's the point. That's why we're here. I am only doing what I'm doing because Jesus reached down to me and pulled me closer, and I took steps. And that's all we want for you. So one real key way we can do that this season, this Christmas season, what's coming up, the year that, compared to the year that shall not be mentioned last year. I mean, this Christmas feels like almost normal. And people are looking for something spiritual to do at Christmas time. I mean, my goodness, we sing Christmas carols in department stores and it's playing in malls. I mean, this is our moment. All we got to do is just take the moment. So we're going to give you a chance to take that moment. In the pew back in front of you, we've got clipped, somewhere on that pew there are clipped these invite cards. So just get those. You can distribute those down the aisle, the rows there. And if you happen to be sitting on a row, maybe you run out, there's probably some in front of you. You can grab it from there. Also some at the info center. These are invite cards for your friends, family, coworkers, frenemies, enemies, whatever you want to have. The front side has just the information on it. Back side just has our Christmas Eve celebration and the time on it. And it's one service, 4 p.m. right here. And you heard it in the video announcements. It is going to be a celebration of Jesus' birth. And one of the things we're going to do is, because we know people are looking for that spiritual experience. You know what I'm talking about. They're looking for that away in a manger moment. They're going to get that. But we're going to make sure that everyone walks out of here knowing why away in a manger even mattered. That what the significance, what we've talked about every Sunday, what we're going to talk about even next Sunday. Why did the birth of Jesus even matter? Because as Christians, we know you can't have the birth of Jesus without Easter Sunday, without Good Friday. You got to tie the whole story together, because it's not just his birth, it was his life and his death on the cross and his resurrection. We're going to tie all that together. And yeah, there's going to be Christmas carols. Yeah, there's going to be candlelight. Yeah, there's going to be a story for the kids. It's all that stuff. It's a celebration, because this brings us joy to celebrate what our Lord did when he changed how we even keep our calendars, when he changed what human life meant, when he changed your life and my life, and hopefully changes a bunch of your friends and family's lives. And like I said, if we run out of these, we've got plenty. If it's not in the pew in front of you, it'll be out the info center. Take as many as you want. These are dated for this year. They do us no good after this year. So take all of them and give them all out. And when you see it on social, be sure to share it, because that kicks it up in the algorithm so more people can see it, because we want folks to come out and to hear what Jesus did for them. Truly the greatest news we could ever share, because the gulf was too big for us to cross. We couldn't get to him. So bridging that gulf out of tremendous love, causing us great joy, the Father gave us his Son. And in giving us his Son, he marked the countdown to the coming of his kingdom on earth. The kingdom we bear with our lives every day to show people the joy that we have because of the joy he had in coming to us.